And sorry,
You don't know when it quit?
it was paused.
Oh, okay.
It
Do you think it
I've
was paused from
I
the
don't
last time when you said to get going?
yeah, I my recording is 3 seconds long. Good Lord Almighty.
Because
Uh
we're professionals.
that's me.
We'll be-
Hello and welcome to X Witness Awake. I'm your host Jonathan. I hope that you're having a good day today. Today I'm bringing you a special treat. It's the epic journey of trying to make this recording. An hour into the recording with my special guest, which you'll see in a moment, I discovered that it was on pause. So here we go. Let's introduce, you know her as Linda, the Apostababe. There we go.
Hi.
You're on screen. Okay.
Yay.
Yay.
Right on.
So
This is great.
this has been a long time coming because we've been trying to record since well before Christmas.
Right?
Like sometime in September, maybe. I don't know. Um, and after attempt after attempt after attempt, and finally having an hour's worth of technical difficulties, we recorded for an hour, and I discovered that I actually had it on pause.
Yeah. Yeah.
So here we go. Enjoy, everybody. How you
It
doing?
was just, I'm doing pretty good. Yeah. Thank you for asking.
You're welcome. So I remember from you were saying previously that you were involved with Jehovah's Witnesses until about the age of 19. Is that right?
Right. So I was raised within the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses, and my mother was baptized when she was pregnant with me. And then I have a sister 2 years younger than me. And so
I was
her
baptized.
and my,
Mom was baptized when she was pregnant with me too. So there you go.
yeah, right.
Sorry, go ahead.
So, I grew up with, the Paradise book, which is kind of a orangey, Pepto Bismol, pink kind of book.
I remember that.
Yeah, that came before my book of Bible stories. And I, grew up looking at that, which is pretty horrid. And I've always been very kind of precocious and didn't sit still very well at the Kingdom Hall. So uh, that was pretty tough. Um, and there was a lot of things I knew at a very young age that God was disappointed in me. Jehovah was very disappointed in me. My mother was very disappointed in me. But in my mind, here I am being raised to be a Jehovah's Witness. That was just the understood. That's just how things are going to go. You know, we are raised in this culture, and I do consider it my culture of origin. So there was no other option in my head besides I will become a Jehovah's Witness. I actually thought I already was, but I would hear about baptism, and I saw it much like when someone gets married to their partner. It's a display of a commitment that they already have in their hearts, right? So getting baptized would be a display of an outward display of the commitment I already had for Jehovah, right?
Mhm.
And so at 17, I studied to get baptized, and that didn't go well because, well, basically, I grew up in special ed, so I had learning disabilities, and things were not making sense when I would have these studies. So the way I learned in school was I didn't go to the next level until I understood the level I was at. So when we were doing the studying of whatever book that was, I don't even remember the book. they would want to.
Was that the organized to accomplish Jehovah's ministry or something like that? Or is that the,
I don't
I don't
think
remember.
so.
No.
Whatever the little book was that was probably from the most recent assembly or something, I don't even
Okay. Okay.
remember. I just remember it wasn't making sense. And in school, I would get to a certain point that I couldn't understand it anymore. I'd go to my teacher and be like, okay, I'm stuck with this. And, they didn't give me the answer. They just made a few suggestions for me to look at it in a different way than I had said I was looking at it, so that it would encourage me to come up with my own conclusions and to finish that level and then go to the next level. But that wasn't happening within the Bible study. And so I would be encouraged to just go to the next chapter, and I was told that it would make sense later. And either within that chapter or the next chapter, I was seeing something else that didn't go with the other thing that I couldn't make sense of. And I was like, how does this work? And a lot of times I would be mocked within the questions I asked, and would explain to them why it didn't make sense. And after 6 months,
Your teacher was mocking you?
yeah,
Wow. That's
yeah,
harsh.
like I would explain the way I was thinking about it, and she would just say, "That's what you think," and I would just think to myself, like I wasn't even offended. I was just looking at them like I wasn't used to that when I was learning something. I had really good special ed teachers that it was questions were welcomed, and when
Yeah.
I said something didn't make sense, that was okay.
That doesn't sound very
Never
loving.
laughed at. It was just like I didn't even realize that was like an intimidation thing.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even realize it. So, they would encourage me to go ahead. So I would reluctantly say, okay. And again, it was just something else would come up. I couldn't make it make sense with the thing that I couldn't make sense of before. I just couldn't make it all make sense. I can remember like when I was 11 or 12, sitting at the dining room table and asking my mom, okay, so from the time of Jesus and the disciples all dying off to the time of Charles Taze Russell, who was the organization God was using? Because they tell us God has always used an organization, right? And she says, well, there was a great apostasy. Okay. So what was the organization God was using? Because if there's always been an organization, where was the one between? You know what I'm saying? That's quite a long time of like I could not. There was no answer to that. So that one really stuck with me. So
That
God's always had an organization, but yet they didn't seem to be one until Charles Taze Russell showed up.
that sounds like the duck and weave method of
Yeah,
teaching. Like, don't look at that.
right. But I was like 11 or 12 at that time, which, by the way, I was 11 in 1975. So, I can remember, like, I grew up on the doctrine of 1975, and then the organization gaslighted us and told us
Mm-hmm.
we were over enthusiastic. We were too over enthusiastic. And they didn't really say that Armageddon was going to happen in 1975, which technically that's right. But there was like a combination of teachings that
Well,
once put together like puzzle pieces, it meant we were expecting the Great Tribulation or Armageddon to happen in
there
1975.
was a lot of literature that was talking about it, and certain like conventions were on stage. They're talking about it. So
Oh, yeah.
when they're saying that people were just sort of speculating, well, why were they doing that? Because you were talking about it. You were making it a
Absolutely.
thing. If you hadn't printed that
Yeah.
information and said those things on stage, people wouldn't have thought No one would have concluded that themselves because none of it made sense anyway.
Yeah. My father ended up getting baptized in 1975, just in time.
Just in time. Just made it.
Just in time, right? So I didn't realize then, but I've come to realize since, as an adult, that if 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 a parent doesn't have their spouse with them in the organization and they just have their kids, they're kind of considered spiritually weak. And I can remember growing up, and my mom would always hang out with someone who had a spouse that didn't go to the Kingdom Hall, or else single women that had kids. Families never invited us to different things. I can remember hearing certain people at the Kingdom Hall talk about some gathering they went to and what a great time they had. And I remember just looking at them thinking, why did we not know about this? Now I get it. We were considered spiritually weak and were purposely not invited to these, events. Not to say that, the Kingdom Hall would have a potluck at the park or something, maybe every 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
Yes, we would go to those, but yeah. So I wasn't supposed to associate with kids at school, right? Nobody in the Kingdom Hall really wanted to associate with us. So it was very isolating.
Feels very lonely.
Growing up. Yes, very isolating. And I can remember too, I was like I had just gone into the 5th grade. So I went from elementary to the 4th grade, and then I went to middle school from the 5th grade to the 8th grade, and then high school would start from the 9th to the 12th. So my first year in intermediate school, they make up your schedule, and I got into choir, and I love to sing, right? So I'm super excited. And I had talked to the choir teacher saying, I really want to sing a solo, right? I had my little record that I brought in and, showed him the song and sang with it. And he was like thinking, okay. I go home and tell my mom.
Stay tuned for Linda singing for us.
Thank you.
Just kidding.
I go home. I tell my mom, I'm in choir, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then my mom tells me, yeah, you can't be in choir because they're going to have a Christmas concert.
Yeah.
I was like, wow. So I had to march my hiney the next morning to the office and sign myself out of choir, which I didn't want to do, and tell them that it was against my religion because there's going to be a Christmas concert.
And she didn't think that maybe you could just, not do that part.
Right. So 2 years later, my sister is in orchestra and playing violin, which, by the way, they have a Christmas concert too. But for some reason, she was not informed that she could not be involved in it. And I remember thinking that didn't make sense. A lot of stuff didn't make sense growing up. So by the time I got into high school, I was in choir. I was enjoying myself singing. And I wasn't told I have to get out of it, which was cool. And just growing up as a Jehovah's Witness, I knew I had the truth. I knew that the only option is to become a Jehovah's Witness. I think of like growing up in the organization as like you're a Jehovah's Witness in training. That's the only option for you.
Oh yeah, totally. So, you're expected to follow the family's rules and to get baptized, and if you don't, well, you're bad association.
Right. And I got in trouble a lot with my mom.
Oh.
And I now realize it was there's just so many rules within the organization. You can't do this, you can't do that. And when you want to pursue a self-interest, it gets squashed, and you're usually told to put that on the back burner or wait for later and do service for the organization because we're so close to the end, right?
Yeah.
And you'll have time to do that in the new system of things, which is what we would call back in the day the New Order. And I was expecting that Great Tribulation and then Armageddon, and we're going to live on Paradise Earth, and people will be, older people are going to be eventually getting younger and younger, kind of like around the age of 30 or something. That's the way everybody's going to end up being, right? Today, it's like I think to myself, wait a minute, we're not going to have much time once we get there, because first we're going to have to clean up all the bodies, right? That's going to take quite a few years.
Yep.
Clean up, I don't know how many billion bodies. We're going to have to bury them, but it won't be that bad because, animals are going to.
Somebody's got to get on that construction projects and make all those log cabins and tree houses and
right. So animals will eat on these bodies, and the birds are going to pluck out the ears, eat the eyeballs. So it's not going to be that big of a deal to have to bury them all, right? And like you said, there's going to be construction, that idea of building your own home, and that sounds like it's going to take a lot of time.
Yep.
And even more so as people become resurrected, which, by the way, more than just Jehovah's Witnesses will be resurrected. The teaching was, you're not going to make it through Armageddon if you're not a Jehovah's Witness. But everybody that's ever lived ever, before Armageddon hits, is going to be resurrected. And then we're going to have to preach to them to teach them the truth. And if they don't adopt that at the end of the 1,000 years, when the devil gets loose again, it's like there's going to be another, Satan's going to be the ruler of this system of things, and then it's like Groundhog's Day or something.
That reminds me of what's his face, Stephen Lett, and they thought that God was gonna let them live the way they wanted to, but they're gonna find out they're wrong. They're gonna have to give up that way of life and adopt Jehovah's righteous standards.
Yes, I remember that so well, because
like the homosexual.
Yes, thank you.
Oh my goodness.
Yes, and the way he said that was, the person is going to have to rise up to the standards of Jehovah. Yeah. Like, not God's going to change us, right? We're going to have to clean ourselves up to be approved by God, which is basically the whole story all the time. We have to be other than who we truly are to be approved of by Jehovah. Being your authentic self is pretty much not allowed.
Yeah. And it's scary when you think about it. You've got a scenario where somebody's died or been destroyed or whatever, and then they wake up, and now they have to like go through being the same person and being told, no, it's still bad, still wrong, so you're going to have to stop that, or you're going to get destroyed again. Doesn't seem very nice, does it?
It doesn't. It really doesn't. And I understand that, this resurrection is really attractive. It's anybody you ever meet at the door, or when you give this kingdom message of the resurrection. I mean, everybody's has someone that they know of that has died. Many have got someone they were close to that has died. So that pretty much applies to everybody. So I can see why that's attractive.
Oh, yeah. I mean, who wouldn't want an opportunity to have their loved one back?
Yeah, to be able to be reunited with your loved ones.
Yeah.
And being shown in the Bible that that's something that God wants to create for us. And so that's really the gospel of the organization, which is very different than mainstream Christianity, which when I left the organization, I left because I was kicked out, much like the video they recently took down of that
Oh yeah.
guy with a boyfriend named, forget what his name. I think it was, anyways. All she could think about was him, and
I loved him. I loved him.
right? She's stupid in love, right? And you know, I they that my parents and the organization wanted me to break up with uh, this person, and I said no. You know, so I got kicked out of my home, and I went and moved in with him and his parents. And his parents were very good to me. His mother helped finish raising me, which was a really good thing. She was very, very good to me. And I had a friend who had another friend who I knew was crazy because she was Pentecostal, right? And I was raised believing that demons fly around those folks. So um, I was always scared when I saw her. But I was at her mother's house one day with my friend, and she walked over and gave me a stack of cassettes and then walked away. So I knew she was giving me these cassettes. And in those cassettes were cassettes of Dr. Walter Martin. And Dr. Walter Martin wrote a book called Kingdom of the Cults and founded this radio show called The Bible Answer Man, where people could call in and ask theological questions, and he would be able to answer them. So after a while, Hank Hanegraaff was the host of that show for a while. I did get to call and speak with Dr. Walter Martin one time, which was pretty cool. But when I saw these cassettes, I didn't know who this man was. I'm listening to him talk to people that are Jehovah's Witnesses, and I'm listening to these stories of what it sounds like to kind of debate whether the doctrines were true or not, the doctrines of Jehovah's Witnesses. So this falls under apologetics, which means standing for your faith, standing up for your faith. And at that time, I wasn't so much believing in the organization as much, and I was naturally drawn towards mainstream Christianity because I felt as though. So after these tapes, I realized this really isn't the truth. I spent about 3 years going over each and every little. It was kind of like listening to a sketch of these people having conversations, him with Jehovah's Witnesses, and after about 3 years, I went through each and every single scenario and looked up every single watchtower, scripture, everything. And originally, I was going to prove this guy wrong.
Sounds like those conversation stoppers you find in the reasoning book.
Oh my God, yes. Because back when I was younger, we had the ministry school every week, and we were taught really how to have an answer to any of the questions that we found asked of us at the door. We knew how to debate, So I thought I knew better than this guy. I was going to prove him wrong. 3 years later, I'm like, this is, he's right. He's right. And so it was like finding out that the spiritual father I was raised under was like adopted or something. He wasn't my true father. So it was very natural for me to want to search for my spiritual, authentic father. And I found that within mainstream Christianity. So I was a Christian for about 30 years and raised my kids.
Was it any particular religion or just sort of generic Christianity?
First, it was like I would go to a Baptist church. Those are pretty low key, but over time, I would go to different churches. But at first, it wasn't easy for me to go to a church because we were indoctrinated to believe that if you leave the Jehovah's Witnesses and become any part of Christendom, which is anything other than Jehovah's Witnesses, then there's demons flying around in there, and you will have been committing what they call spiritual fornication, right? And so during that time when I was naturally drawn towards mainstream Christianity, somebody gave me Randall Waters' phone number, and he was like the first Bethelite that I had ever met. But I talked to him on the phone, and he gave me the phone number of someone named Cynthia Hampton. And Cynthia Hampton lived in the next city over from me. And you may have seen her on the Leah Remini show that they were that they had with the Jehovah's Witnesses on the show. Boyd Evans was on there, and a couple of other people. She was in a cobalt blue dress, and they had some chairs behind the couches. She was sitting on one of those chairs next to Fifth, the musician. So she was sitting next to him, and she told her story near the end about how her husband, as when she was a Jehovah's Witness, used to beat on her. And she went to the elders, and the elders told her to stop nagging him and go home and be a better wife.
Yeah, problem solved.
You need to go home and be a better wife.
That's some bad advice.
Later on, he started smoking, and he got disfellowship for that. Not beating on her, just for smoking. But the thing is when I met her, and she told me that her husband used to beat on her, and that he got disfellowship for smoking, I thought to myself, yeah, that sounds about right. But I didn't even stop to think that the beatings and stuff was abuse. To me, I was raised under that. I raised around that kind of. I used to get beatings, and it was just commonplace. So I didn't even realize just how abusive that was at that time. Today, I'm just like, oh my God, that's really abusive. But I didn't think that way before. But she ended up just being a really good friend to me. Our personalities are very different, but she just chose to be a friend to me. And as I was going through that transition time, she too was very much into apologetics, and she too was a Christian. I wasn't a Christian yet, but it was neat to meet her because I was leaning in that direction towards that. So no matter how many times I had asked her questions about this doctrine and what about that doctrine, I could have asked her the same question 72 times, and she never, ever acted like she was fine. Yeah, way different than how my Bible studies went, trying to get baptized. So she was really just patient and just a good friend of mine. I did try to get baptized at the age of 17 and again at the age of 23, but I just couldn't make it make sense. Did I tell you yet about my attempts to get baptized? I think I have. I'm not sure.
You did mention that they didn't let you at first. So
I couldn't get past. I couldn't get to the I just couldn't make it make sense. Now I understand.
That's good that you wanted it to make sense. You just didn't go, yeah, it's fine, because that's what a lot of them will do. They'll just sort of like, yeah, well, you'll pick it up later, it's fine, and then
that
you don't necessarily. Now you're going into something that's going to be life altering with half the information, and not an understanding. So at least you thought of that.
Yeah, that's that just seemed like we get baptized. That's what we do, So I couldn't make it make sense. At that time, I thought it was me. But today I realize it didn't make sense because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. There's a reason for that.
So I was leaning towards Christianity, which was really helpful having Cynthia Hampton as my friend at the time. She took me to an ex-Jehovah's Witness potluck, which Randall Waters was hosting. And so I remember Randall Waters, so he had his own church in Hermosa Beach, but fortunately it didn't look like a church. It just looked like a business, just a room with a bunch of chairs and stuff. And I could not take in what he was teaching. He was actually teaching about Robert J. Lifton's 8 criteria to totalism. But I don't remember learning that, because in my head, and I didn't know it then, what was going on was all kinds of thought-stopping cliches. So as I was there, I remember thinking, wow, I'm in a church. That was like the first time I had gone to a church. And I thought to myself, am I committing spiritual fornication? And my head was like, does that mean I'm a spiritual slut? Like, I just kept having these thoughts that just was in my head. And this is another thing. I remember the table in the back with food, and I remember looking at it wondering if it was poisoned. Like, that's the way my head thought about these other people that were there at this extra Jehovah's Witness potluck. They're apostates. These were the people I was taught were so evil, right? Matter of fact, I can remember when there was this rumor that one of the governing body's members became an apostate. And I remember thinking, oh my God, if it could happen to one of the governing body members, it could happen to anybody.
Be careful, it could happen to you.
And it did.
Yeah.
Yay. Which, today we now know that was Raymond Franz, the nephew of Fred Franz. And Raymond Franz ended up writing 2 books.
Now that sounds fun to go to a potluck for XJWs. I haven't done that yet. I've got to meet with a couple of people so far, but hopefully I'll get to do that sometime.
It was, I still had a lot of the Jehovah's Witness indoctrination, so I was dealing with high anxiety. I wasn't able to pay attention to what Randall was teaching. I looked at, it was really, but unfortunately that experience was really skewed, just really messed up. Today, getting to get together with some extra Jehovah's Witnesses sounds like a really good time.
Yeah.
Just a really good time.
If I start yawning, I'm turning into a pumpkin. It's 3:30 in the morning for me, so.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, but that's okay. We'll barrel on.
Okay. So after about 20 years after I left the organization, I came out as a lesbian, which I never thought I would, because in my head, especially with the mindset of Christianity, that was just not okay with God. But I also did some studying within that too. And
be careful, it could happen to you.
That's totally right. Yeah. So then, and I was still involved with church, and I found another church that was actually very inclusive, and the pastor and her wife and stuff was teaching, and she was the daughter of parents that were like Assembly of God, and they always went on these missions and stuff. So, it was pretty biblical, and I enjoyed the time being there as well. After a while, after about 30 years, I just the more I came to know about the Bible and how it was put together and more of the history as opposed to theology, the history of the Bible, the more I realized that, yeah, I'm not digging this Bible as much as I used to see it as the inerrant Word of God. Um, Back in the day when the Bible was written, there would only be like one or two people in a village or a town that were raised to be a scribe. So these people that were raised to be a scribe would go live with the person that taught them how to read and write.
Yeah.
And the parents would spend them money to teach these kids, much like how today we get to go to school, like elementary school, and get to go to school for however many years and learn to read and write. At that time, that was not for the ordinary citizen, of the town. Only maybe one or two people could do that. So I had learned that people wrote books and they were considered holy writings, and those that were scribes and stuff. And some people would even write out some holy things, and they would purposely not put their own name on there, but put the name of somebody that was considered well known as a holy book writer, or scroll writer. So they would use somebody else's name, hoping that it would be transferred around and more people would look at it. So the more I learned about how that all came into place, it just wasn't. It just wasn't making sense anymore, and I just didn't rely on the Bible as much anymore. And then I just came to a place of, what, I just don't believe this stuff anymore. And that's the place I've been for about a good 5 years. I remember texting a few of my friends asking them, do I have to believe in evolution to not believe in God anymore, or the God of the Bible? And they're like, I don't think so. I'm like, good, because I don't understand this evolution stuff. But since I have been at that place, and I never thought I would be, I just have so much more peace today, which sounds paradoxical, but that's just the way it is in my head today. And
peace can come from a lot of different directions.
Yeah.
Something that doesn't make sense to some people, it can bring you peace.
I think it can be beneficial. I think those that go to church, we all need community, and going to a local church can be a nice place to have that. So I see the benefits of it, and I just don't see there's very good things in the Bible, but there's also, I don't care for that God of the Old Testament much at all. I just don't. It was pretty scary.
Yeah.
Very scary. And
there's some pretty crazy things that you find in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
Sure. So I guess this kind of leads into your speaking out about the organization and
right. So
did this sort of deconstruction, did it lead to this, or was it a different motivation that made you
it did
speak
lead
out?
to this? Right. So when I first discovered the Ex Jehovah's Witness, community, which I didn't even know it existed before, maybe 7 years ago, I was already doing kind of self-studying, and the doctrines of the organization were still very much there in my head. I did end up getting baptized as a Christian in a Baptist church.
Oh, okay.
And that came very natural to me. I had some Bible study at the church, and it all made sense. So I was cool with it, right? I never expected my kids to get baptized or wherever we went to church. But um, yeah, so when I discovered the Extra Jehovah's Witness community, I remember when I was um, a Christian, I used to say I can speak by denomination because I knew Watchtower theology and I knew Christianity theology like the back of my hand, right? And now I understand it's I forget what it's called. I can't think of what it was called, but anyways, I used to call it by denominational.
Okay.
But yes, a friend of mine, I kept getting into these relationships that were abusive. And one day, a friend of mine said to look up the word narcissistic. So I did, and then I realized, okay, I've been getting together with people that are narcissistic, and I'm the common denominator. Why do I keep doing this? That ended up taking me to places where I discovered cult leaders are narcissistic. And the more studying I did, the more I realized, oh, okay, so I'm drawn to this because it's my norm, because my culture of origin was very abusive. So once I was getting that connection, it came pretty natural for me to reach out and talk about the doctrines of the organization. In my mind, yes, they tell us one thing, but on the other side, I think to myself, yes, they're telling us this, but what's really going on? Because that's pretty much how it is. There's deception used. So I got involved, and over time, I wanted to start my own channel, and I did that just over a year ago. I do a show every Saturday
it's only
night.
been a year?
Yeah, just over a year. Oh, no. For my own YouTube channel, yes, it's been a year, but I used to be on the platform of 6 Screens. Rick Farron used to give me a time slot, and I had a chance to host with a few people and sometimes just by myself.
Yeah.
And I
that's what threw me off, because I'm thinking, I've seen you for a long time. How has it only been a year?
Yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. Yeah. And
Makes sense.
That transition went very smoothly too. There wasn't any burnt bridges. It,
good.
He was, it wasn't anything bad. I had wanted to start my own channel, and things got a bit too hectic at 6 Screens. So it was a time for me to step away and start my own channel. And I've really enjoyed that. And it just comes very natural to me.
If it helps, I'll be like, and now it's time for everyone's favorite apostate babe, Linda James.
And you know what? I mentioned that. I mentioned that because somebody gave me that term, Apostababe.
Oh yeah.
I can't remember his name right now, but when I first got involved in the community, I thought that sounds really cool. I'm gonna use that as my own. So yeah, that was very cool.
I'm keeping that.
Yes, exactly. So I really enjoy talking about more today, not so much about the doctrinal differences, but the techniques and tactics that are used in high demand, high control groups that show up in abusive relationships, that show up in families. It's a very unbalanced power and control dynamic that can make a group a cult. Like the PTA, Parent Teacher Association, can even be a cult. Anything could be a destructive cult. The word cult comes from culture. So when I say I consider the organization as my culture of origin, I think of that as being part of culture. But the more I found out about the techniques and tactics that are so manipulative to get people to do what they do, that's not really them being able to be themselves, to make their own decisions. But what the organization does is gets people to a point where they're convinced that their decisions is going to lead them to death. You know, they'll use terminology like the heart is treacherous, who can trust it?
Yep.
You know, and then we say, you know, who would you rather trust? God giving you directions or yourself? And you have to look at all the mistakes you've made and you think to yourself, yeah, God's a better option. Well, by the way, God's always used an organization, and by the way, it's us.
Yeah.
It's worth awesome, you know?
It,
So,
I
yeah.
I always think it's interesting how they say we fit the bill as to the organization that Jehovah uses because we say so.
Yeah.
You know,
Because we say so, yeah.
self-appointed is what it is.
It
Not
really is.
It's not independently someone else saying these men, you know, it makes sense. This is what the doctrine shows. No, it's the people who have basically made themselves the president of the organization, saying that we're, you know, we're that way because we are.
Precisely. And, you know, it's been 10 years. This is 2025. But in 2015, there was the Australian Royal Commission. And when um, Geoffrey Jackson was questioned about how the governing body becomes the governing body, he pretty much explained that they get voted in, you know, and then the decisions they make was also revealed through Crisis of Conscience, which was Raymond Fran's book.
Yeah.
You know, so the more I've come to realize how this organization is put together, the more I just realize how man-made it is.
Yeah.
And I pretty much see a lot of religions that way, all of them actually today. Some are worse than others. And I see the organization of Jehovah's Witnesses as being high on the worst list.
So, do you see yourself continuing to, you know, talk about these things like far into the future? You feel content with, you know, your channel and so on, anything like that?
I do enjoy talking about it because I think if people are familiar with the techniques and tactics, the abusers or narcissists, malignant narcissists even use, um, they won't be so easily they won't easily succumb to these situations, you know, as much. And if they do, they'll recognize it quicker and leave sooner, you know, from those relationships. When somebody's a battered spouse, um, they usually have to leave their abusive predator partner about 7 out of 10 times for them to finally leave them. You know, so it's not uncommon for someone that leaves a destructive cult and even join another one or go back to that one. You know,
Yeah.
it's a thing that naturally happens because that's what they're used to. You know, it's what I've been used to. But yeah, I'm even thinking about talking about politics. I can see the politics today using a lot of the techniques and tactics
Yeah.
that are of that are being used in different cults. You know, that are abusive techniques. So being that it's along that same lines, I'm going to be getting into a bit of politics too.
Sorry, I wasn't on the screen, but you could see me yawning.
Mm-hmm. It's all good. It's all good.
So that's usually I see you on Saturday nights because I'll be cleaning because I'm normally cleaning on the weekends and you know during the evenings. And
I love it
so,
when you chime in.
what's that?
I love it when you chime in. It's like I know you're working, but you give us a greeting and
Yeah,
maybe
I
make
try.
a few comments, you know. But
Yeah,
I know you're doing that late night working.
yeah. So,
It's just always fun to see you chime in.
um,
Thank you.
yeah, it's fun, and it's nice to see the conversations going. So, if you're not uh, personally familiar with Linda's channel, I hope you'll check it out. It's you want to tell your time slot?
Sure. Then the name of the channel is Apostababe Linda James, and I come on at 9 p.m. on Saturday nights Pacific Standard Time, which was pretty much the same time my show would start on Six Screens. So um, I do live shows every Saturday night and bring up different subjects, and then I open things up for people to talk about what's on their mind. You know,
Yeah, I
it
think
could
that's
be
a
doctoral stuff. It could be anything going on in their lives.
I think that's
Go
a
ahead.
gift because I don't think I would be able to think of anything to say after a while. Somehow you're able to carry on the conversations and talk about things, and that's why I work well in the background, just cracking jokes and stuff.
You do. That's and you add to it. I really appreciate what you add to it,
You're welcome.
and it gives us a sense of community too. You know,
Yes, I think that's
um,
important.
there's people that will show up and they might not have been part of the organization, but you know, they're allies or they've had
Mhm.
similar experiences in different situations, and that's been really cool. You know, so it's not only ex Jehovah's Witnesses, but for the most part it is. But other people are welcome, and I just really enjoy it. More than I thought I would. You know, at first I was just kind of like scared because I had not shown my face yet.
Mhm.
When I started my own channel, I started showing my face. No, I did show my face for a while with Six Screens. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Before that, I was scared.
Oh, okay.
But this is what I go through. I get scared and then I do it. Um the thing about talking about politics, I'm scared, but I'm going to do it. It's just
Well,
what I'm going to do.
you'll find
I'm
that
going
there's
to
a
ask.
lot of different views, a lot of different opinions, beliefs, and that's
Can you
good.
say that again? I missed it.
I said there's a lot of different views, opinions, and beliefs, but that's okay. If
It
people can
is.
have a conversation, talk about how they feel about things, and respectfully, you know, either add to the conversation or agree to disagree, but it doesn't have to be a punch out, drag out fight all the time when it comes to religion and politics. There's room for discussion. There's room for opinions and beliefs.
And that's what I'm hoping for. This freedom that we have since we left the organization is really amazing, and I don't want to persuade people to take a route that doesn't come natural to them. Um, I think people are drawn to what they're wanting to try out next. You know what I'm saying? So I don't see my channel as something that tells them what to believe, and we had enough of that in the organization. So I have respect for these different journeys that people are on. We're all at kind of different places and in our healing, and I just think it's really fascinating to hear where people are at in their journey. And I don't expect them to believe like I do. They're right where they're supposed to be. You know,
Mhm. And it fits well too because I have this channel, Ex Witness Awake, but also the Apostate Coalition channel that that I started, and I don't do as much on there anymore, just because life has gotten busy and I have other pursuits that I'm doing. I'm doing story writing now, and um, started, and I don't do as much on there anymore, just because life has gotten busy and I have other pursuits that I'm doing. I'm doing story writing now, and um, so
I'm really enjoying that. By the way, thank
oh,
you
thank you.
for
Yeah, it's
have
been a lot
starting
of
that
fun.
up.
It's
It's
kind of
very cool to see your gifts.
a new
Thank you.
chapter creatively in my life, but forgot what I was going to say. Oh, the idea with that channel, the Apostate Coalition, is you can have people from different religious backgrounds, different upbringings, you know, that can
That's
come
wonderful.
together and just sort of work together to battle, these different cult groups. Um, just sort of,
Yeah.
like pool of resources, so to speak, and hopefully it'll something will come from it.
Absolutely. A lot of us ex Jehovah's Witnesses have that time that we spend in the org as a bonding thing
Yeah,
for most of us. When we try to explain to people that are in society at large what we went through, it's pretty unfathomable for them to
yeah,
even realize this happens in like in freedom, but we didn't grow up in freedom. So the fact that we are now in freedom and others believe differently, that's part of their freedom. And, you know, for the most part, that should be honored, you know?
freedom is important.
And there's human rights, which we had no idea we had either.
Yep.
And your human rights can be found at the United Nations.
Yep.
Yes, at Babylon the Great.
I did a video on human rights in the UN. It's been a while now, but somewhere in my catalog. But
yeah, Article 18 is the human right for freedom of religion.
mhm.
And the organization will go to court on a regular basis demanding their freedom of religion, and they are entitled to it. But what a lot of us don't realize is we are entitled to freedom of religion as
That's
well.
right. They,
Within that Article 18, it says that you have the human right to change your religion or belief, which means if you go to a different church, um, that's a human right. Or if your beliefs are not anything spiritual at all, this is part of freedom of religion. And to be shunned or to have consequences of your family ostracizing you, that means that the organization is violating our human rights, and we don't deserve that.
that's for sure. Yeah, that's one thing I always believe. If if you change your mind, you shouldn't have your life ruined because you disagree.
Right. And I get that people, if they're part of a group and they break the rules, you know, or they choose to not go to this group anymore, they don't go anymore. Or they break the rules and that disqualifies them from being part of a group. Um, that's acceptable and expected. What's not acceptable and what's not expected is for the leader of that group to make everyone of that group never speak to the one that's no longer part of that group.
Yeah.
That's socially unacceptable in society at large. And that's what is part of what makes this organization so toxic, because families are broken up, friendships are broken up.
Yeah, and if someone decides they don't want to be associating with you, that's their right. You know, some people have a friend and they become toxic to them and they have to cut them out of their life, and that's totally acceptable because you got to look out for yourself. But
Which,
to have it as an institutionalized thing for your family
mhm.
is just wrong, and that's something that needs to change. And hopefully, with the different, you know, court cases going on, that eventually it'll work itself out to cut that, cut that away as a practice. Because if people
Right.
want to be a Jehovah's Witness, fine, great, more power to you. But
Mhm.
don't let the organization take away your ability to have your family and your friends if you really want them to be part of your life.
Yeah, that's part of their human right of freedom of religion, um, to either leave or the people within the see what happens is the people within the religion are being coerced that if they do associate with them, they too will be disfellowshipped.
Yeah.
And disfellowshipped is more than just being kicked out of any group. The indoctrination is God considers you dead, and you are going to die in Armageddon. And it's, I was talking about Robert J. Lipton earlier and the 8 criteria of totalism. Number 8 is something to the effect of you don't even deserve to exist. That's the mindset and the doctrinal teaching of the ostracism. So if you find yourself in a toxic situation and you remove yourself from it, that's different than you're involved in a group and you've either chosen to leave or been kicked out because you broke some rules, and then they are coerced to shun you, ostracize you, because they too will be disfellowshipped. It's very different. One is you move yourself away from toxicity because you're receiving some abuse. The other is a punishment, and they call it a loving provision. They call it a form of discipline, but that's not the case. It's outright punishment and public shaming when someone is trying to get back into the organization and told they have to sit in the back and to show up just after the meeting starts and to leave just before the meeting ends so that other people in the congregation will feel uncomfortable for having to shun them. Right?
So
wow.
you keep doing what you do on your channel, and there's a lot of other XJWs out there that are doing similar things, and collectively we can make a difference.
I really love the different personalities we have and the different age groups we have doing this, speaking out against this organization and other cult groups.
Yeah. So I want to thank you very much. We're right at just a little over an hour now of recording that actually got recorded. It's more like 3 hours, but it's been condensed down to an hour.
Right
so
on.
I'm gonna have to hit the hay. I have to work tomorrow. So I've really enjoyed having a conversation. I'm glad we were finally able to make this happen. And
me too.
Whenever you're all seeing this, I have to do a little editing magic here, but
perfect.
Yeah. Thank you for watching, and thank you for dropping on by.
Thank you.
So we'll bye for now.
Bye-bye.